Last year, I wrote a tiny book, and I want you to realize that you can write one too. You can become an author too, a tiny author. This is the book, Any Language You Want. It's tiny, it's 80 pages. You don't need to have a big audience. You don't need to have a talent. You don't need to have an extraordinary life. You don't even need to have a contract with a publisher these days. I didn't have any of those things, and yet I self-published this book, Any Language You Want, and it's one of my proudest achievements in 37 years of my life. Tiny is okay. Tiny is okay. You don't have, if you think about writing a book, you don't have to think about writing one of those big books that you've read. I've read big books. I've got one here, actually. Will. It's the autobiography of Will Smith. It's a big book, but you don't have to write that much. You can publish a tiny little book that will help other people. Let me ask you a question. How long is a good story? How long is a good idea? Many of the best books that I've read are tiny. For example, Anything You Want by Derek Sivers is about 90 pages. Animal Farm by George Orwell is about 90 pages. Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson, again, I think it's 97 pages. Tiny is okay. You can deliver value, you can tell your story, you can write a tiny book that will make you proud and that will help other people. So you don't need talent, extraordinary life, you don't need any of those things, but you do need to know who your book is for and what your book is for. When I started writing my own book, my own little book, I had a clear idea of who the book was for and what it was for. At that point, I had been teaching English for many years, so I knew that my book was going to be for language learners. And I knew that my book was to inspire language learners. So I just knew these two things. I thought, I'm going to write a book where I tell my own little stories about how I learned English, because English is my second language, in order to help other language learners and to show how they can learn, how I learned and how they can learn. So who's your book for? What is your book for? This is crucial, but I didn't do any market research. I didn't draw the avatar of my ideal reader. I didn't, ask around. I didn't ask people what book. I didn't ask language learners what book do you want me to write. None of those things. I just knew who it was for and what it was for. It was already there. It was already here. And I'm sure that if you have an idea for a book, you already know who's it for and what's it for. So you've already got enough to start writing. More than enough. You've already got everything that you need to start writing. Now, having something to say wasn't enough for me. So you already have a lot to say. Despite what you believe, your container of ideas, stories, your container of opinions and things that you can write about is already full. It's overflowing. It's overflowing. You don't need an extra idea. But having something to say, I believe, it's not enough. It's not enough. I think that to become a tiny author, you need to have a desire to be helpful. So you want to help another person. You want to send out a message. You want to tell a story. You want to explain a concept in order to help another person. This may be an horror story. Maybe you want to tell an horror story in order to entertain or to scare another person. You want to entertain another person by scaring them. This is why we read horror stories. Or maybe you want to write a collection of poems to inspire other people, to enlighten another person. Or maybe you want to write an how-to book, a manual, so you will teach something to another person. Well, to write a book, to become a tiny author, you need to have this desire, a desire to be helpful, to be useful to someone else. I'm asking you, do you have this desire? Because if you don't have it, well, maybe you shouldn't write a book. And this is key, I think. The difference between authors and non-authors is not that authors have more ideas, they're more creative, they have more time to write, or they have this innate inspiration. No, this is things for movies. Writers, authors, have decided to help other people, have decided to be useful through sentences and words. They've decided to share their hearts and minds, bits of their hearts and minds, with other people, so that other people will learn, will grow, will be entertained, will dream. This is the main difference. Non-authors have decided, for whatever reason, not to. They've decided not to entertain, to write words and sentences. So it's not that authors are better people. Authors have just made a decision. So if you want to become a tiny author, well, you just have to decide. What format? What book for your book? What format should you choose? Now, when I read reviews, I've read a review on Goodreads about a book that I loved, The Practice by Seth Godin. I actually interviewed Seth Godin in an episode of this YouTube channel. You can go and check it out, but this is not the point. The point is, I've read this review of Seth Godin's The Practice. Here is the review. It's not that it's a bad book, it's just that it's not really a book. It's shaped like a book, it looks like a book, it's printed like a book, but it's not actually a book. It's just a concatenation of various blog posts from him. Then those pages got organized into chapters, and then it got a cover. So it's a book. So now it's a book. Yay! Now, I've seen many of these reviews, like 1-star review. This book is not a book, it's a collection of blog posts. Well, I really don't understand this. No one complains about recipe books, about a recipe book being a collection of recipes. No one complains about a book titled Several Short Stories About Cats being a collection of short stories of unrelated tales about cats. So why do we have this idea that a book should be divided into long chapters, each chapter explaining and developing the idea? Well, no. This is one way to write a book. My book is a collection of short stories, personal stories, on how I learned English and how I learned English, what I did to learn English, and how you can learn a second language too. And each story contradicts the next. This is a format that was inspired by another book that I read, Anything You Want and How to Live by Derek Sivers. But, I mean, a book can be anything you want. Really, you can use any. It doesn't have to adhere to any conventional standards. It can be a collection of photos with a short text that explains what you learned in that moment, so you inspire another person. It could be a collection of jokes. It could be, really, it doesn't have to, there's no one right way to write a book. So what idea do you have in mind right now? What book could you write? What tiny book could you write? Could you start writing today? And that's probably, what excites you? What is a book that you would love to have written? Then write it. That's it. You don't have to ask for confirmation. You don't have to you don't need to do market research. If that topic excites you, if you think this is something that I would love to write about, and this is a book that I would love to publish, well, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? You can do it. You can start today. And the beautiful thing about self-publishing a book is that you don't have a deadline. You don't have a deadline. I didn't have a deadline when I started writing Any Language You Want. I didn't have one. I didn't have a publisher who told me, this must be, send your drafts by next month. No. I procrastinated, of course. Everyone procrastinates. We can read Atomic Habits, we can read all those self-help books, but it's innate. Procrastination is something that we have to live with. Okay, there are people who procrastinate more than others, but this is to tell you that you will procrastinate, especially when you get to a point where you feel stuck and you don't know how to continue your story. Then you will start going to the fridge and eat, whatever you've got in the fridge. That's what I used to do this is what I do when I get stuck in my writing, in my work. But the beautiful thing is that you can start writing today and publish it in 2 years. This didn't happen to me because, I was very excited to write my book. So for 1 year, I couldn't wait to sit and type and tell my stories on how I learned English. I couldn't wait. So this is something that you could do too. To summarize, to recap, tiny is okay. The format, choose whatever format you want. Number 3, who's it for, what's it for? But you already know that, I'm sure. And number 4, deadline. Well, you don't need you don't have deadline. It's the beauty of self-publishing a book. But start now. Start today. Okay, tomorrow. Start tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you have time. It's this is not a bestseller. I can tell you, I've sold, I think now 325 copies, and I've made, I can tell you, less than 1,000 euros in 1 year. I have to pay tax on those 1,000 euros. So really, you're not doing it for the money. I didn't do it for the money, because clearly, if you want to make money, well, you don't do this. But the pride you will take, I don't even know how to describe it, the excitement, the satisfaction, the fun that you will have, the development, the self-development as a writer that you will achieve is incredible. It has no price. Priceless. So I hope this video inspires you. I hope that if you want to check out the book. But if you're not a language learner, this is not for you. So this is not to talk about, it's not to sell my book. It's to sell the idea. It's to not sell, to give you the inspiration to become a tiny author. I hope you will. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.